The crystal spires of Zelani Prime caught the light of 3 suns and threw rainbows across the sky. Chancellor Vexari stood on the highest tower, watching the colors dance through the air like living things. Her people loved beauty and peace. They had built cities that sang in the wind and gardens that grew music from the ground. For 10,000 years the Zelani had never known war. Today that peace would die. The first ships appeared as dark spots against the morning sky. They moved wrong like living things instead of machines. As they got closer, Vexari could see they were made of black metal and pulsing flesh. The ships had no straight lines. Everything curved and twisted like the inside of some giant beast. "Chancellor," her aide Kexanal rushed to her side. "The outer colonies have gone silent. All of them. The last message we received was..." He stopped, his crystal body flickering with fear colors. "Tell me," Vexari said softly. "Screaming, Chancellor. Just screaming." The Kreth had arrived. 3 months earlier and 700 light-years away, Captain Lisa Morgan was having a very boring day. The Earth survey ship Defiant drifted through empty space at the edge of known territory. Her job was to map star systems and look for anything interesting. So far she had found a lot of nothing. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "I'm picking up something strange. It's a transmission, but it's coming from way outside our normal range." Lisa stretched in her chair. After 6 months of mapping empty systems, anything was better than staring at more rocks and gas clouds. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was like music, but music filled with pain. It spoke in a language Lisa had never heard, but her computer quickly found a match in the Galactic database. Zelani. The translation came through a moment later. "To any civilized species capable of helping us, we beg for your aid. Our people face total destruction. We have lived in peace for thousands of years, but now death comes from the dark between stars. The Galactic Council has refused to help us. They say we are too far away, too small to matter. We offer everything we have to anyone willing to help preserve what is left of our civilization. Please someone, anyone, hear our words and remember that we existed." The message repeated 17 times in different languages. Lisa listened to each one, feeling a cold anger grow in her chest. The Galactic Council included the most powerful species in known space, the proud Altarian Empire with their golden ships and 1,000-year battle traditions, the Nexus Federation, who controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes, the Corvin clans whose warriors were legend throughout the stars. All of them had said no. "Ma'am," her navigation officer spoke up. "According to the signal strength and direction, this is coming from the far rim. That's Zelani space, about 2 weeks travel at maximum speed." Lisa stood up. "Send a message to Earth Command. Full priority. Tell them we have a humanitarian crisis and I'm requesting immediate support." She paused, thinking about the fear in that musical voice. "And tell them the Galactic Council has abandoned these people to die." On Earth, Admiral John Carter received the message during his morning briefing. He was a big man with gray hair and scars from the colony wars. He had spent 40 years in space fighting pirates and exploring new worlds. He had seen enough suffering to know it when he heard it. "What do we know about the Zelani?" he asked his intelligence officer. Kate Sullivan pulled up a holographic display. "Peaceful species, silicon-based instead of carbon like us. They've been in space for about 10,000 years, but they've never developed military technology. They're known for their art and philosophy. The galaxy considers them harmless." "And the Kreth?" Kate's expression darkened. "Bad news, Admiral. They showed up about 50 years ago from outside the galactic rim. Nobody knows where they come from exactly. They're a hive mind species that consumes entire worlds. Not just the people, but everything. Plants, animals, even the minerals in the ground. They leave dead rocks behind them." Carter studied the tactical display. "What's their military strength?" "Unknown, sir. No one who's fought them has survived to report back. The few colony worlds that have sent distress calls went silent within hours of the first attack." Carter walked to the window of his office and looked out at Earth. Blue and green and white, spinning peacefully in space. His homeworld looked beautiful from up here, but he knew how dangerous it really was. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, ice ages. Humans had survived because they learned to adapt, to fight, to never give up even when everything seemed hopeless. "The Council species won't help because it's not worth the risk," he said finally. "That's the assessment, sir. The Zelani territory is too far from their main trade routes and population centers. They consider it an acceptable loss." Carter turned back to his staff. "Acceptable loss." He tasted the words and found them bitter. Kate, how many ships can we get to Zalani space in the next week? Sir? Kate looked surprised. You're thinking of intervening? I'm thinking that when people are screaming for help and everyone else looks the other way, that's when you find out what kind of person you really are. Carter moved to his command console. How many ships, Kate? The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet is finishing exercises near the Centauri colonies. Admiral Sam Brooks has 2 battleships, 4 cruisers, 8 destroyers, and a full Marine regiment. Maybe 15,000 personnel total. Against an enemy that's conquered multiple star systems? Kate nodded slowly. It would be suicide, sir. Humans have only been in space for 100 years. We're barely a footnote in galactic politics. The major powers have millions of years of experience and technology we can't match. Carter smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Kate, those major powers are scared. They've had peace for so long they've forgotten how to fight a real war. But humans? He looked around at his staff. We spent 200,000 years learning how to survive on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We know how to fight when our backs are against the wall. He opened a communication channel to Admiral Brooks. Sam, cancel your exercises. I have a new mission for you. What kind of mission, John? The kind that'll either make us heroes or get us all killed. How do you feel about fighting monsters to save people you've never met? Brooks laughed over the comm. Sounds like Tuesday. What do you need? Everything you've got. And Sam? Carter paused. Make sure the crews understand this is volunteer only. Nobody goes who doesn't want to be there. 3 days later, Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of his flagship Yorktown and watched his fleet prepare for the jump to Zalani space. He had asked for volunteers. Every single person in the fleet had stepped forward. Even the cooks and maintenance crews wanted to help. The Galactic Council had sent a formal protest to Earth, demanding that humans stay out of the conflict. The Council warned that interfering with the Kreth could bring their attention to human space. They called the mission reckless and doomed to failure. Brooks didn't care. He thought about the message from the Zalani, that musical voice filled with desperation. In his 40 years of service, he had learned that the measure of a civilization wasn't how powerful it was, but who it chose to protect. All ships report ready for jump. Sir, his navigation officer announced. Brooks looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were dying while the galaxy's greatest powers did nothing. But humans had answered the call. Maybe they were too young and too weak to make a difference. Maybe they would all die far from home. But they would try. Jump, Brooks ordered. The human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a war that would change the galaxy forever. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zalani territory and found hell waiting for them. Admiral Sam Brooks stared at the tactical display on his flagship Yorktown. 3 Zalani colony worlds showed as dead zones on the sensors. No life signs, no communications, no energy readings. Just cold, empty rocks where millions of beings had lived. Only days before. Jesus Christ, whispered Commander. Jake Martinez from the destroyer Thunder. Bay. His voice came through the comm channel with static and disbelief. What did they do to these planets? Lieutenant Amy Foster, the fleet's xenobiologist, studied the sensor readings from her station aboard the science vessel Discovery. Admiral, I'm not reading any organic material at all on the surface of these worlds. It's like someone stripped away every living thing down to the bedrock. Brooks had seen war before. He had fought pirates in the asteroid fields and put down rebellions on the outer colonies. But this was different. This was the complete erasure of life itself. Status report on the remaining Zalani worlds? Sir, his communications officer called out. I'm picking up distress signals from Zalani Prime and 2 other planets. They're under attack right now. Set course for Zalani Prime, maximum speed. All ships, battle stations. As the human fleet raced toward the Zalani homeworld, they got their first look at the enemy. The Kreth ships were nightmares made real. Instead of clean metal and straight lines like human vessels, these things looked alive. They pulsed with veins of dark energy running through organic hulls. Some had what looked like massive jaws at the front, opening and closing as they moved through space. They're not ships, Amy Foster said over the comm. They're creatures, living beings that have been turned into weapons. Commander Martinez watched the largest Kreth vessel through his view screen. It was easily twice the size of any human battleship, covered in writhing tentacles and glowing with sickly green light. How are we supposed to fight something like that? The same way we fight everything else, Brooks replied. We adapt. The first engagement came sooner than expected. A pack of smaller Kreth vessels, each about the size of a human destroyer, detected the approaching fleet and moved to intercept. They moved in perfect formation like a school of fish or a flock of birds. "All ships spread out and engage," Brooks ordered. "Let's see what these things can do." The battle that followed taught both sides hard lessons. The Kreth ships fired weapons that seemed to be part biological, part energy, green beams that could melt through armor, and living missiles that chased human ships like angry hornets. But they fought with predictable patterns, moving as one mind, controlling multiple bodies. Human ships scattered in all directions, using tactics that confused the hive mind. When the Kreth concentrated fire on one vessel, 3 others would attack from unexpected angles. When the aliens tried to surround a human ship, it would suddenly accelerate in a direction that should have torn it apart, but somehow didn't. "Their formation is breaking up," Martinez reported as he spun his destroyer in a spiral that would have killed any other species from the G-forces alone. "I don't think they know how to deal with individual thinking." The first Kreth ship died when Martinez pulled a move no sane pilot would attempt. He flew directly at the alien vessel, waited until the last second, then used his ship's emergency thrusters to flip completely around while still moving forward. The maneuver let him fire his main guns directly into the Kreth ship's soft underbelly while flying backwards. "How the hell did you do that without killing your crew?" asked Captain Nancy Rodriguez from the cruiser Wolverine. "Humans are built tough," Martinez replied as his ship shuddered from the stress. "Our ancestors survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. A little high-G maneuvering isn't going to stop us." The engagement lasted 3 hours. When it was over, 5 Kreth vessels were dead or dying, drifting in space like broken toys. The human fleet had lost no ships, though several were badly damaged. More importantly, they had learned something crucial about their enemy. "Amy, what's your analysis?" Brooks asked as they continued towards Zalani Prime. Foster was studying samples of Kreth biomatter that had been blasted off during the battle. "Sir, these creatures evolved in low gravity and thin atmosphere. They're perfectly adapted for space combat, but I think they might have trouble with high-G maneuvers and dense atmospheric fighting. They're also used to fighting species that think like them, in groups with shared consciousness. And humans think like crazy people? Compared to most galactic species, yes, sir. We're unpredictable because we're individuals. Every human pilot fights differently, thinks differently. The hive mind can't predict what we'll do because we don't even know what we'll do until we do it." They reached Zalani Prime to find the crystal cities under siege. Massive Kreth bioships hung in the atmosphere like diseased clouds, raining down destruction. The beautiful spires that had caught sunlight and thrown rainbows were cracking and falling. Parts of the planet's surface were already stripped bare, showing the gray rock beneath. Brooks made a decision that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. "All ships atmospheric entry. We're taking this fight to the ground." "Sir." His navigation officer looked pale. "Our ships aren't designed for atmospheric combat. The stress could tear us apart. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't." Brooks opened a channel to the entire fleet. "Listen up, people. We're about to do something that every military manual says is impossible. We're taking battleships into an atmosphere to fight aliens that should be able to crush us. The only reason this might work is because we're too stupid to know it can't be done." The human fleet dove towards Zalani Prime like meteors, their hulls glowing red from atmospheric friction. Kreth bioships moved to intercept them, but the aliens had never faced enemies willing to turn their own ships into weapons. Commander Paul Stevens, leading a squadron of destroyers, used his ship's wake to create atmospheric turbulence that sent 3 Kreth vessels spinning out of control. Captain Rachel Morris flew her heavy cruiser through a cloud of Kreth biomissiles, using her ship's armor to detonate them, while shielding a group of Zalani civilians below. On the ground, Marine Colonel Rick Torres was having his first face-to-face meeting with the Zalani. The crystal beings stood almost 8 feet tall but were incredibly fragile by human standards. Their bodies were made of living silicon that rang like bells when they moved. "We cannot fight as you do," Chancellor Vexari told him through a translator device. Her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Our people have never known violence. We do not understand war." Torres looked out at the Crystal City where his Marines were setting up defensive positions. Human soldiers were teaching Zalani civilians how to take cover, how to recognize enemy movement, how to survive in a war zone. It was like teaching children, except these children were thousands of years old and had knowledge that could advance human science by centuries. You don't need to understand war, Torres told the Chancellor. You just need to survive it. That's what humans do best. Dr. Helen Garcia, the fleet's chief medical officer, was discovering just how different Zilani physiology was from human. The injured Zilani she treated had wounds that would have killed any carbon-based life form. But their silicon bodies could regenerate as long as their core crystal remained intact. Your people are tougher than they look, she told Vexari as she worked on a young Zilani who had been caught. In a Kreth energy blast, we break easily, Vexari replied. But we can be repaired. Your people seem to be the opposite. You bend instead of breaking. Garcia smiled as she sealed a crack in the young Zilani's arm with a silicon compound. Maybe that's why we work well together. Above them, the battle raged on. Human ships darted between Kreth biovessels like angry wasps, striking fast and hard before disappearing into the clouds. The aliens' overwhelming size advantage meant nothing when they couldn't catch their targets. But the humans were learning something else about their enemy. When Martinez managed to capture a wounded Kreth drone, Amy Foster made a discovery that would change everything. Admiral, she reported from the Discovery, the individual Kreth aren't evil. Without the hive mind controlling them, they're actually quite intelligent and even peaceful. I think we might be fighting the wrong enemy here. Brooks looked at the tactical display showing hundreds of Kreth bioships surrounding the planet. What do you mean? I mean, maybe the real enemy isn't the Kreth themselves. Maybe it's whatever is controlling them. And if that's true, then we might not need to kill them all. We might be able to free them. It was a thought that would have occurred to no other species in the galaxy. Only humans who had learned to see the individual worth of every thinking being would consider trying to save their enemies instead of destroying them. The battle for Zilani Prime was just beginning, but already the humans were changing the rules of galactic warfare in ways that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The war for Zilani Prime had been raging for 2 weeks when Captain Ryan Walsh decided to do something that every military manual said would kill him and his crew. Walsh stood on the bridge of his destroyer, Wolverine, watching the massive Kreth hive ship that hung over the planet like a diseased moon. The biovessel was 3 times the size of anything in the human fleet, protected by smaller ships that moved around it in perfect formation. Standard tactics said you needed overwhelming firepower to crack something that big. Walsh had a different idea. All hands prepare for atmospheric entry, he announced over the ship's comm system. We're going to hit them from below. His navigation officer turned pale. Sir, the heat from entry will overload our shields. And even if we survive that, pulling up from a dive like that could tear the ship apart. Maybe, Walsh admitted. But these Kreth things have never seen anyone crazy enough to try it. Sometimes the best weapon is doing something so stupid that nobody expects it. The Wolverine dove toward Zilani Prime at maximum speed, its hull glowing white-hot as it plunged through the atmosphere. Kreth bioships moved to intercept, but they were positioned to defend against attacks from space, not from something coming up from the planet's surface. Walsh pulled his destroyer through a climb that should have crushed every person on board. Human bodies, evolved on a high-gravity world where falling meant death, handled the stress better than any other species in the galaxy could have managed. The crew stayed conscious and kept fighting even as the G-forces reached levels that would have killed most aliens. The Wolverine burst out of the atmosphere directly beneath the main hive ship and fired every weapon it had into the creature's soft belly. The biovessel convulsed like a wounded animal, green blood spraying into space as secondary explosions rippled along its length. Target hit, Walsh reported as his ship rolled away from the dying giant. Sometimes you just have to be willing to risk everything. On the ground, Colonel Rick Torres was learning that fighting in Crystal Cities required a completely different kind of warfare. The Zilani had built their settlements inside massive caves beneath the planet's surface, with tunnels and chambers that went down for miles. When the Kreth ground forces came hunting for refugees, Torres turned the entire underground into a maze of death. Set the charges there, he told Sergeant Ben Clark, pointing to a crystal formation that supported one of the main tunnels. When those bug things come through, we'll bring the ceiling down on them. Clark looked worried. Sir, that'll trap us down here too. We won't have a way out. Then we'll make a new way out, Torres replied. Humans have been digging tunnels and surviving cave-ins for thousands of years. These Kreth evolved in space. They don't know how to fight underground. The first Kreth ground assault came 3 hours later. The aliens moved through the tunnels in perfect formation, their chitinous bodies clicking against the crystal walls. They were built for space combat, with long limbs and natural armor that could stop most weapons. What they weren't built for was Torres's idea of underground warfare. The Marines had spent days rigging the entire tunnel system with explosives, creating a three-dimensional battlefield where up and down meant nothing. When the Kreth entered what they thought was a simple cave system, they found themselves in a nightmare of collapsing tunnels, falling rocks, and humans who seemed to appear from solid walls. "Now," Torres shouted into his comm. The crystal caves erupted in a chain reaction of explosions that sent thousands of tons of rock crashing down on the Kreth assault force. The aliens, used to the emptiness of space, had no idea how to deal with an environment that could literally fall on their heads. Meanwhile, Sergeant Clark and his squad used mining equipment to blast new tunnels through the wreckage, creating escape routes that let them attack the surviving Kreth from directions the hive mind couldn't predict. Above ground, Pilot Commander Sophie Lewis was proving that humans could fly in conditions that grounded every other species in the galaxy. A massive radiation storm was sweeping across Zilani Prime's northern continent, the kind of electromagnetic chaos that would blind most spacecraft and send their pilots crashing into the ground. Lewis led her fighter squadron straight into the storm. "I can't see anything on instruments," reported Lieutenant Danny Kim over the squadron comm. "The radiation is scrambling everything." "Then we fly like our ancestors did," Lewis replied, "by sight and instinct. Stay close to the ground and follow the crystal formations. The Kreth bioships can't function in this radiation, but our electronics are hardened from growing up near Earth's magnetic field." The human fighters swept through the storm like ghosts, using the electromagnetic interference as cover. They struck Kreth ground positions that thought they were safe from air attack, then disappeared back into the radiation before the aliens could respond. The Kreth hive mind was starting to adapt to human tactics, but every time it thought it understood how humans fought, they did something new and impossible. When Major Pete Williams's unit was surrounded in the ruins of a crystal city, the aliens expected them to either surrender or fight to the death in position. Instead, Williams did something no other species would even consider. "Set off the charges," he ordered his demolitions expert. "All of them." "Sir, that'll cause a volcanic eruption. We'll be right in the middle of it." "That's the idea. These space bugs have never dealt with lava flows and poisonous gas." "We have." The explosions triggered a chain reaction that cracked open an underground magma chamber. Lava began pouring through the crystal caves while toxic volcanic gases filled the air. The Kreth, adapted for the clean vacuum of space, couldn't handle the poisonous atmosphere and extreme heat. Williams and his Marines survived by retreating into the lava tubes, using equipment designed for mining operations on volcanic worlds. They had breathing masks, heat-resistant suits, and the knowledge of how to move through an environment that was trying to kill them every second. When the eruption ended 3 days later, the Marines emerged from the cooled lava to find the entire Kreth assault force dead. The aliens had been completely unprepared for enemies who could turn a planet's geology into a weapon. Dr. Amy Foster was making discoveries about the Kreth that shocked everyone in the fleet. The captured Kreth drone she was studying had been separated from the hive mind for over a week, and its behavior was changing in ways nobody expected. "It's learning," she reported to Admiral Brooks from her lab on the Discovery. "Not just adapting or following programming, but actually learning like an individual. It's been watching our medical procedures and trying to help treat injured Zilani." Brooks looked through the observation window at the Kreth drone. Without the hive mind controlling it, the creature moved differently, less mechanical, more curious. It was currently using its delicate manipulator arms to help Dr. Garcia repair a crack in a young Zilani's chest crystal. "Are you saying this thing is becoming friendly?" "I'm saying it was always capable of being friendly. The hive mind just never let it choose." Foster pulled up her research data. "Admiral, I think we've been looking at this war all wrong. The Kreth aren't evil conquerors. They're victims. Victims of what? Of their own evolution. Somewhere in their past, they developed a collective consciousness that was supposed to help them survive, but it got too powerful, too controlling. Now it drives them to consume everything they encounter because it can't conceive of any existence except growth and expansion." Brooks thought about the implications. "So if we could break their connection to the hive mind, we might be able to free them all, turn enemies into allies." Foster paused. "It's never been tried before." No species has ever attempted to rehabilitate an entire enemy race instead of destroying them. No species has ever been human before. Brooks replied, "What do you need?" As the battle for Zalani Prime continued, the humans were developing a strategy that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. Instead of simply winning the war, they were trying to save everyone involved, including their enemies. It was a goal that required not just military strength, but the kind of moral courage that came from growing up on a world where cooperation meant survival and individual sacrifice could save the group. The Kreth hive mind was about to learn that humans didn't just fight differently than other species. They thought differently, felt differently, and dreamed of futures that no logical military calculation could predict. And that difference was going to change the galaxy forever. Intelligence analyst Chris Parker had been staring at Kreth battle patterns for 3 weeks when he finally saw what everyone else had missed. Parker sat in the cramped intelligence center aboard the flagship Yorktown, surrounded by holographic displays showing every engagement between human and Kreth forces. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. Something about the alien tactics was bothering him, like a puzzle with a piece that didn't fit. "They always retreat at the same time," he said to himself, then louder to his assistant. "Look at this, Jenny. Every single battle, the Kreth pull back when they lose exactly 37% of their forces. Not 35, not 40. Exactly 37%. Lieutenant Jenny Walsh looked over his shoulder at the data. Maybe that's just their breakpoint. The point where they decide the losses are too high. But look at this, Parker highlighted another pattern. They never send rescue missions for stranded units. They never try to recover wounded. Any individual Kreth that gets separated from the group is immediately abandoned, even if it could be easily saved." The pieces started falling into place in Parker's mind. The Kreth hive mind made every decision based on mathematical optimization. It calculated the best outcome for the whole group and never wavered from that logic. Individual sacrifice was acceptable as long as the hive survived and grew. But humans were different. Humans routinely made choices that defied logic, especially when it came to saving each other. A human commander would risk an entire unit to save one wounded soldier. Parents would die to protect their children. Soldiers would charge into hopeless battles to buy time for civilians to escape. The hive mind couldn't understand that kind of thinking because it had never evolved the concept of individual worth. Parker ran to Admiral Brooks with his discovery. "Sir, I know how to break them. The hive mind has a critical flaw. It can't process the idea of sacrificing the group to save individuals. But that's exactly what humans do all the time." Brooks listened as Parker explained his plan. It was insane, suicidal, and completely impossible by any rational military standard. It would require multiple coordinated attacks where human forces would deliberately destroy themselves to create openings for others. "You're asking me to send people on suicide missions," Brooks said quietly. "I'm asking you to let people volunteer for suicide missions," Parker corrected. "The difference is everything. The Kreth hive mind calculates every action based on optimal survival. It can't predict or counter tactics based on willing self-sacrifice." Brooks thought about the message that had started this whole war, the Zalani Chancellor's desperate plea for help. Earth had answered that call when everyone else turned away. Now they were being asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. "I'll present it to the fleet," Brooks decided. "Anyone who volunteers, volunteers. Anyone who doesn't want to participate can stay with the defensive forces." Within 6 hours, every single person in the human fleet had volunteered. Operation Deathworld began at dawn on Zalani Prime. The plan required perfect timing between multiple attacks that should have been impossible to coordinate. But humans had been performing impossible coordination for millennia. From ancient hunts where success meant survival to modern military operations where split-second timing meant the difference between victory and defeat. Captain Nancy Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her ship Earthborn and looked out at the massive Kreth hive ship that controlled the entire enemy fleet. Her mission was simple in concept and terrifying in execution: fly directly into the heart of the hive ship and detonate her vessel's entire nuclear arsenal from the inside. "Ma'am," her navigation officer said quietly, "the radiation levels inside that thing will kill us long before we reach the core." "Then we'd better work fast," Rodriguez replied. She opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the captain. In 30 minutes, we're going to do something that's never been attempted in galactic history. We're going to fly a human warship into the center of an alien hive ship and blow it up from the inside. Everyone who wants to leave can take the shuttle bays now. No shame in wanting to live. Nobody left. Meanwhile, Commander Paul Stevens was leading a boarding party onto a Kreth biocruiser. Their job was to plant nuclear charges throughout the vessel's organic hull, knowing they would have no way to escape before the detonation. The boarding pods cut through the alien ship's flesh like bullets, carrying Marines into the writhing corridors inside. "This place smells like death," Sergeant Lisa Chen said as they moved through passages that pulsed like the inside of a giant heart. The walls were covered with veins that carried green fluid, and the floor felt soft and wet under their boots. "Stay focused," Stevens replied. "Plant the charges and keep moving. We've got maybe 20 minutes before this thing's immune system figures out we're here." The Kreth bioship was like nothing in human experience, but the Marines adapted as they always did. When the passages split and reformed, they used their demolition charges to blast new paths. When organic doors tried to seal shut, they cut through with plasma torches. When alien antibodies attacked them, they fought back with weapons designed to kill living tissue. Above them, Lieutenant Rachel Morris was piloting her fighter toward the hive ship's neural center, a massive organic structure that coordinated the thoughts of millions of Kreth drones. Her mission was to use her fighter itself as a guided missile, severing the connections that held the hive mind together. "Control, this is Razor Lead," she transmitted to the fleet command, beginning final approach. "Tell my kids I love them." Morris pushed her fighter to maximum speed, diving toward the neural center as Kreth biofighters swarmed around her. The alien craft were faster and more maneuverable, but they flew in predictable patterns. Morris used every trick she had learned flying through Earth's violent weather, changing course at random intervals and using debris as cover. She reached the neural center just as her fighter's hull began to buckle from enemy fire. Instead of trying to pull away, she aimed directly at the largest cluster of nerve tissue and hit her afterburners. The explosion sent shock waves through the entire hive ship. For the first time in the war, the Kreth fleet hesitated. Individual bioships began drifting as their connection to the central mind flickered and failed. Rodriguez used that moment of confusion to drive the Earthborn deep into the hive ship's core. The massive vessel tried to close its wounds around the human ship, but Rodriguez had studied the internal scans and knew exactly where to strike. Her ship's nuclear arsenal detonated in the hive ship's central nervous system, sending cascading failures throughout the creature's body. Stevens and his Marines felt the shockwaves as the biocruiser they were on began to die around them. The organic walls started dissolving, the floor became unstable, and the air filled with toxic gases. But they had completed their mission. The nuclear charges they had planted were already counting down to detonation. "This is it, people," Stevens said to his squad. "We did what we came to do. The fleet will know we succeeded." The biocruiser exploded in a chain reaction that took out 3 other Kreth ships. The nuclear fire spread through the organic hulls faster than anyone had expected, consuming alien vessels that had seemed indestructible just hours before. Across the battlefield, the Kreth hive mind was experiencing something it had never known in millions of years of evolution: panic. The coordinated attacks had created too many failures at once. Bioships were losing contact with the central consciousness. Drones were becoming confused, making individual decisions instead of following hive commands. Dr. Amy Foster watched the chaos from her lab aboard the Discovery and realized they were witnessing the birth of individual consciousness in an entire species. "Admiral," she called Brooks over the comm, "the separated Kreth drones aren't dying. They're thinking for themselves." Throughout the fleet, isolated Kreth began doing something that shocked every human who saw it. They stopped fighting and started helping. Kreth drones that had been cut off from the hive mind began rescuing human survivors from damaged ships. They started treating wounded Zilani civilians. Some even tried to communicate, using broken fragments of Galactic standard language they had absorbed from conquered worlds. The hive mind's greatest strength, its perfect unity, had become its fatal weakness when faced with enemies who valued individual choice over group survival. The war was ending, but not the way anyone had expected. Instead of total victory or defeat, something entirely new was being born among the stars. 6 months after the Battle of Zilani Prime, Admiral Sam Brooks stood in the first joint human Kreth Zilani colony and watched 3 species work together to build something that had never existed before. The settlement on New Harmony was unlike anything in the galaxy. Human engineers worked alongside Kreth drones to construct buildings that combined practical human design with the organic architecture the Kreth instinctively understood. Zilani artists added crystalline elements that turned the entire colony into a work of art that sang in the wind. "It's beautiful," said Chancellor Vexari as she watched a group of human children play with young Kreth in the colony's central garden. The former enemy aliens had adapted quickly to individual thought, and many showed remarkable curiosity about the species they had once tried to destroy. "It's impossible," Brooks replied with a smile. 6 months ago, those Kreth were trying to eat everything on your planet. Now they're teaching our kids how to grow crystal flowers." The transformation hadn't been easy. When the hive mind finally collapsed completely, millions of Kreth drones across the galaxy suddenly found themselves alone with their own thoughts for the first time. Many had gone insane from the shock. Others had simply shut down, unable to function without constant mental guidance. But some, freed from the endless hunger that the hive mind had forced on them, discovered they were naturally peaceful beings. They had intelligence, creativity, even what humans recognized as emotions. The Kreth homeworld, when finally located, turned out to be a garden planet where the original species had lived in harmony with their environment for millions of years, until the collective consciousness had grown too strong and consumed their individual identities. Dr. Amy Foster had become the galaxy's leading expert on Kreth rehabilitation. Her research station on New Harmony was constantly busy with former hive mind drones who were learning to make their own choices. "The hardest part," she explained to a visiting delegation from the Altarian Empire, "is teaching them that they have the right to disagree with each other." The Altarian ambassador, a tall being with golden skin and ancient eyes, looked skeptical. "These creatures nearly destroyed an entire sector of the galaxy. How can you trust them?" "Because we've seen what they become when they're free," Foster replied. She gestured toward the window where a Kreth engineer was carefully adjusting the crystal resonance chambers that provided power to the colony. That drone was part of the fleet that attacked Zilani Prime. Today he spent 6 hours figuring out how to make the power system more efficient so the Zilani children would have better lighting for their art classes. The transformation of the Kreth was just one of the changes sweeping through the galaxy. Earth's intervention in the Zilani crisis had shifted the balance of power in ways that none of the major species could ignore. The Altarian Empire, proud rulers of 100 star systems, had been forced to acknowledge that the primitive humans had succeeded where their ancient military traditions had failed. Emperor Cathivore personally traveled to Earth to offer a formal alliance. "Your people have shown capabilities we did not expect," the Emperor told Admiral John Carter in the ornate chambers of Earth's orbital diplomatic station. "We would be honored to share knowledge and coordinate our military efforts." Carter, still wearing his simple Earth uniform instead of the elaborate dress clothes his staff had suggested, looked out at the Altarian battle fleet hanging in space near Earth. "Your Honor, we appreciate the offer. But our alliances come with conditions." "Name them." "First, any joint operations include humanitarian protection for civilian populations. Second, we don't abandon species just because helping them isn't convenient. Third, rehabilitation comes before destruction whenever possible." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. These terms would have been unthinkable just a year ago. The Altarians had ruled through strength and careful political calculation for thousands of years. But the humans had proven that there were other ways to project power. "Agreed," he said finally. The Nexus Federation, the galaxy's dominant trading power, was facing similar changes. Their vast commercial network suddenly had to compete with human merchants who operated on principles that seemed to defy economic logic. Trader Captain Mike Thompson stood in the market plaza of Kepler Station, watching his crew distribute medical supplies to refugees from 3 different war zones. His ship, the Carolina Trader, wasn't making a profit on this run. In fact, they were spending their own money to help people who couldn't pay them back. "Thompson," called out Nexus Trade Administrator Veltar, a spider-like being with multiple arms for handling complex transactions. "Your accounting makes no sense. You're losing money on every planet you visit." "Short term, yeah," Thompson replied, helping his crew unload food supplies for a group of displaced Zilani families. "But long term, we're building something better than profit. We're building trust. Veltar clicked his mandibles in confusion. Trust does not generate currency. Maybe not, Thompson admitted, but it generates loyalty. And loyal customers become partners. Partners become friends, and friends help each other succeed. It was a philosophy that the Nexus Federation was slowly, reluctantly beginning to understand. Human trading posts throughout the galaxy operated on principles of mutual aid and shared prosperity that somehow resulted in better outcomes than pure profit-driven commerce. Even the warrior Corvin clans were adapting to the new reality. Warlord Grixath, leader of the most feared military force in the galaxy outside of Earth, had requested permission to send his best fighters to train with human marines. "We do not understand your tactics," he admitted to Colonel Rick Torres during a joint training exercise on the desert world of Kefra. "You fight like berserkers, but you think like philosophers. You risk everything to save enemies who were trying to kill you moments before." Torres watched as human marines and Corvin warriors worked together to rescue simulated civilians from a collapsed building. The exercise was designed to test cooperation under extreme stress, and both species were learning from each other. "It's not complicated," Torres replied. "We figure every thinking being deserves a chance to choose who they want to be, even if they make bad choices at first." The galaxy was changing in other ways too. Commander Jake Martinez, now promoted to captain of the new heavy cruiser Resilience, received a message that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a distress call from the Vorthak system. They're under attack by something called the Iron Swarm. They specifically requested human assistance." Martinez looked at the star charts. The Vorthak were a militant species known for their independence and pride. For them to ask for help meant the situation was desperate. "Set course for Vorthak space," he ordered. "Maximum speed." As the Resilience and its escort ships jumped to hyperspace, Martinez thought about how much had changed since that first desperate message from Chancellor Vexari. Humans had answered one call for help and found themselves becoming the galaxy's protectors, not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple willingness to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Back on New Harmony, Dr. Helen Garcia was treating her strangest patient yet, a Kreth drone who had been separated from the hive mind for over a year. The alien had developed what could only be called a personality, complete with preferences, opinions, and something that looked remarkably like a sense of humor. "Doctor," the Kreth said in careful, slow words, "I have been thinking about names. Other individuals have names. I would like a name too. What would you like to be called?" Garcia asked. "Hope," the Kreth replied without hesitation. "I would like to be called Hope, because that is what your people gave me, the hope to choose who I want to become." Garcia smiled and updated the patient files. Former Kreth drone 7734 was now officially Hope, the first of his species to choose his own identity. Outside the medical center, the three sons of New Harmony painted the sky in colors that had never existed before the three species learned to live together. Human children played games taught to them by Zilani elders, while Kreth engineers learned to build things that enhanced life instead of consuming it. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, misunderstandings, and setbacks. But for the first time in galactic history, former enemies were working together to create something better than what any of them could build alone. Admiral Brooks received the reports from across human space with a mixture of pride and concern. Earth's ships were spread thin, answering calls for help from dozens of worlds. The galaxy was learning to depend on human intervention, which was both an honor and a burden. "Sir," his aide informed him, "the Galactic Council has formally requested that Earth join as a permanent member with full voting rights." Brooks laughed. The same council that had refused to help the Zilani now wanted Earth as an equal partner. "Tell them we'll consider it, but our conditions remain the same. Protection for everyone, not just the politically convenient." As he spoke, new distress signals were already coming in from distant stars. The galaxy was a big place, full of species in need and enemies that needed to become friends. Earth's Deathworlders would answer every call, because that's what humans did.